Irashaimase! Hello and welcome to Fitaurus Kitchen. I'm your host, Chef Fitaurus. It's time once again for Shoot 'em Up Saturday, and on the menu this Saturday we have Star Force, a 1984 shoot 'em up classic. What kind of taste will it have? Let's get cooking and find out. Today we're looking at the Arcade Archives release of Star Force, originally available on the PlayStation 4 a couple years ago, though only in the Japan region. It's now available on the Switch, and it comes with the usual enhancements that the Arcade Archives brings. So we have a high score mode where we can compete against others for leaderboard position. And there's also a caravan mode, which is basically the same thing, but with a 5-minute timer. Today, though, we'll be looking at the original mode, though I feel the best way to play this release of Star Force is the high score mode. Starting the original mode, we see our controls. Really, that's basic as you can get, really. There's 2 buttons that are your main shot, and then the arcade cabinet controls, putting in the credits and starting the game itself. So we'll insert credits and fire up. So we launch in our ship, the Final Star, and begin what is your basic vertical scrolling shoot 'em up. That's the base of the game, and that's really what we have here. Enemies scroll down from the top. The screen scrolls down that way as well. We have a basic shot, and that's it. There are also some installations on the ground that we can destroy for points, as well as some bonus icons that show up. And that's really what we have here. There's also a single upgrade that we can get for our ship, which will power up our shot and specifically make our rapid fire faster, as if you hold down the button, there is a rapid fire shot, though it's relatively slow, and I find it's more effective, at least until you have the upgrade to button mash. We do have a mini boss here where if we can mash fast enough, it's possible to destroy the core before it fully forms, but you have to be quite good. It's something like 16 shots per second to manage that. There's actually a little bit of history with that, where if some of you are familiar with Game Center CX, you might know a little bit more about that. Anyway, we find ourselves at the end of the stage 1 and against our boss. So the stages are named after the Greek alphabet. So you've got Alpha all the way through Omega. And the enemies, the bosses at the end, represent that as well. So we just defeated boss Alpha, and we move on to stage Beta. We should also have a power-up potentially coming our way. So I can show you what's called the parser. So I don't personally like the parser itself because it changes the tone of the shot to something that I don't like. Just a little bit more of annoying of a sound. So there was a series of question mark blocks that I passed a little ways back. That's one of the bonuses we can potentially get, where if you shoot the right question mark, you're rewarded with a 1-up. If you shoot the wrong one, you get a frowny face, but no real penalty other than that. Although, they do take a decent number of shots to turn the question marks, and if you have enemies above those question marks will be blocking your shots, or rather eating up your shots, making it difficult to shoot the enemy. So, that is basically what we have here with Star Force. It's a really straightforward, basic vertical scrolling shoot 'em up. Very similar to contemporaries of the time, such as Xevious, taking down Beta. So, some of the interesting things about Star Force, though, are, well, for one thing, the company that originally released the title, Tecmo. They weren't known as Tecmo for very long, though. The company rebranded in '86 and became known as Tecmo. Star Force itself was released in North America in arcades under the name Megaforce, but when Tecmo released it on the NES in '87, they decided to use the original Japanese name Star Force, so creating a little bit of disparity between the arcade and home console releases, at least in North America. In Japan, the ports of Star Force were handled by Hudson for the MSX and the Famicom as well. It's interesting to note that Star Force, or rather Hudson, would go on to make their own title that was very similar to Star Force, named Star Soldier. Although, if you were to ask me which one's superior, that would definitely be Star Soldier instead of Star Force. Tecmo also did a couple sequels to Star Force, Super Star Force, and Final Star Force, both released to the arcades. There were a couple other releases of the arcade version in particular of Star Force in 2009 to the Wii Virtual Console, and then, as I mentioned, it also is available as an arcade archives on the PlayStation 4 in addition to being available on the Switch. So, that's basically it for Star Force. Minus flavors, well, the game itself is just a little too plain. The bosses are always the same, the stages kind of progress in the same way, the enemies don't have a whole lot of variety to them. There are some interesting enough patterns to work with, but once you've gone through a couple stages, you've kind of seen what the game has to offer. But the plus flavors, well, it's just got that classic feel, and it's just an enjoyable game to sit down and, well, play for that shoot 'em up arcade goodness that this kind of game can present. And really, I feel like the classics are best played to help you enjoy the other titles that would come later in the shoot 'em up genre. So I would give its taste something like a really basic staple. It's like your white bread. Everyone's had it, and you can't really appreciate other types of bread and other types of food, really, unless you've had what the base is that that all these are based on. And, well, I would definitely recommend at least giving Star Force a try if you have the opportunity, though maybe not necessarily this release, it's up to you. That'll just about wrap it up for this week's episode of Shoot 'em Up Saturday. As always, I want to thank you so much for coming out and joining me, and I look forward to seeing you again next week.